Hi there.
Wait a minute. Okay, now.
My name is Billy King, and I was the kid cowboy that Pop Sherman picked to do 4 of the movies that he had purchased from Clarence Mulford. I went to Hollywood, was hired, and showed up in Lone Pine for the first movie. And I met Hoppy on location while he was dressed and was doing some parts for that particular day. And he made a point to come over and shake my hand and look me right in the face and say hello, and you know I'm proud to work with you. And he mentioned my horse Tony. Well, Tony to me was everything. So Hoppy was immediately a good friend as far as I was concerned. But my relationship with him over the next 2 years proved that he was truly the character that he wanted to be. So Bill Boyd, the man, became the character of Hopalong Cassidy. And when I met him, I responded to the Hopalong Cassidy person. I didn't know Bill Boyd. I hadn't had an idea who Bill Boyd was, but I had seen some movies and been in the front row with several other kids in our Delano Theater and was impressed and just enjoyed seeing him play the Hopalong Cassidy character. So immediately, Boyd made a friend of me who was his hero anyway. And later I found out that Les Sealander, who was the director of these movies, had set this up. Because Les, after we got acquainted in several weeks maybe after that, told me that he wanted me to be as natural as possible with Boyd. And Boyd made that possible very quickly when he introduced himself and said, I'm proud to work with you and I like your horse. So Les was very wise because thereafter there were some scenes that the screenwriters had written that had words that were a little funky to me. So Les would say, Billy, you know the script, and if you choose to modify those words to fit what you feel, that's perfectly okay with me. So what Les did was just turn me loose. And there was no acting as far as I was concerned. I was just Billy King, the kid from the country who could ride a horse and was enamored with Bill Boyd. Can we room there? You may want to cut out some of this.
Here's some time. Now, how about Grace?
Well, Grace. Grace was a magnificent lady. Grace showed up on the first movie, and I should look up the date so we could have it for you, but they were married while he was filming the first movie. And he worked Saturday. No, let's see, what was that? Anyway, he did not get away from the set at the time he wanted to because he had to drive to Los Angeles and attend his wedding. And he was late getting to the wedding. And there was lots of ramifications about that. But Grace and he were married, and he brought Grace to Lone Pine, and they stayed in the Dow Hotel. But Grace was not out among the people too much, except after a while I saw her at the pool. So my dad, who was the engineer for most everything that we did, said, why don't you go over and say hello to her? And I don't know her. I'll just say hello. So I walked over while this lady was laying on her tummy next to the pool, and I kind of, I didn't know what to do, frankly, but she finally looked up. So she looked up from her prone position and said, who are you? I said, I'm Billy King. I'm part of the cast. Oh, okay. So there was no impression, no greeting, no how are you, any of that, except I added that I just want you to know you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. And then I left. Well, the ramifications of that were unbelievable because Boyd picked it up. And they razzed me about that statement for weeks, thinking that I was, some sort of, But anyway, he made a lot out of it. And later on, Grace became a really nice person and a wonderful friend to me and was very helpful in many, many cases as far as she was concerned. But she was not out on the set every day, nor was she out in the rooms down at the hotel at night. So we didn't see much of those. But they were on the honeymoon, so what do you expect?
Well, let me poke this. We'll get her. Okay, anytime. You can start whenever you're ready. I got her.
Okay,
running.
Let me explain how I got in the movies. And I got in the movies because my dad brought home a Mustang horse that was about a year old, and he was a pretty animal. That he was dark red and with black mane and tail and 3 stocking feet. And the purpose of my father giving me this horse was to teach me how to take care of a horse and to teach me how to work. Well, my responsibility was to take care of the horse and everything that went with the horse. And as my dad began to train the horse and to begin to train me, the horse responded very nicely, and so did I. So we ended up in a few months that my dad wanted me to go to local county horse shows and enter the horse as a stock horse. So we would go to these stock horse events and I would show them, but I was just a kid and they had no children events at all at that time. So I would be showing my horse with maybe 10, 12, 15 other people who had been showing horses for some time. Well, in the beginning, I didn't know much about that, and neither did my dad, frankly. But we began to work on Tony and me, and we entered show after show after show until I began to win some ribbons, 3rd place, 4th place, and so forth. But I have all these ribbons in a box, and there are 13 second place ribbons that I won, and the guy that won all of the 13 first place ribbons was the same man who was a professional for the Kellogg company. Kellogg had sponsored him to take his stock horses to the shows and be represented. He represented Kellogg Farms. Well, over the time, I would go out to work Tony in the morning on the track, and he would be out working a new fresh horse or something on the track. So we got acquainted. And he began to kind of teach me little hints here and there, not too much, but eventually he actually took over me as a rider and coached me to ride a horse the way he knew how to ride a horse, and to coach the horse to do what he knew the horse wanted to do. And as a result of that, we just bounced up, and we were 1 and 2 in shows all over Northern California for maybe a year. He would win because I couldn't beat him, but Tony would be second, and I thought that was great. And he turned out to be a wonderful friend. I have no idea where he is today, but Kellogg sponsored a man who was a true gentleman and a gracious, gracious man to me, and I'm thankful for his help as far as my horse days were concerned.
I'll just tell you anytime.
The horse shows were the reason Pop Sherman called me to Hollywood. Because some casting director, which I never did find out who it was, must have told him that there was a kid riding a horse in Northern California that might fit the Clarence Mulford characters that he had for these 4 movies. So he called me, and my dad and I went down to Hollywood. So we went into Pop Sherman's office and sat down and so forth. Hello, hello, hello. Pop Sherman was there. Les Sealander was there, who was the director for all 4 of these particular movies. And we talked. And there wasn't much talk about me as a writer, because that was pretty well established. And Les Sealander said, "Billy, come with me." And we went in the other room, and he handed me a script. And he says, "I want you to read this particular scene in one of the movies." Okay. So I looked at it, and I read it, and I said, okay. And Sealander says, "Anytime you choose." So I read what he had pointed me to in the script. And I can't remember the scene at all, but it was only a half a page. And Les hit the table with his hand and said, okay. Then we walked back into the office, and Les Sealander must have given Pop Sherman some sort of a go sign, because Pop said, okay, Billy, we're going to offer you a contract, and we're going to pay you so much a week, and we'll pay you 52 weeks a year. When you're not working, we'll still pay you. And if you promise to show up in Lone Pine, you have a contract. Well, my dad suggested that Tony be included in the contract, and I said, oh yeah, sure, let's include Tony. So Tony and I had a contract with Pop Sherman for a year at a weekly rate. My dad did not get entered into that contract, and we'll cover that later, but there was a good reason why not. So we went home, and I was a kid happy as a clam with a contract to do movies in Hollywood, and knew nothing about what was in store, so to speak. So we arrived home with a contract, and the next time that I saw Sherman was in Lone Pine when we did the first movie. And that's when we checked into that Dow Hotel. And as we checked into the Dow Hotel, there was all kinds of people around, and those were all Sherman's crews that I met and unwound and got acquainted with as time went on, and it was a wonderful experience for me. Oh, I should mention this. I'm not sure whether Lucky, that is Russell Hayden, was asked to come in to meet me or not. But while we were discussing all of these events, Russell Sherman walked in the side door and came into the office. And when he came into the office, I looked up and said, "Lucky!" And I kind of responded just the way a kid would, and that's exactly what I did. And I was kind of embarrassed about it, but he was very nice, shook my hand, he didn't talk to me at all, just said hello and went out on that. So that's the way I met Russell. I met Lucky in the first time I met Lucky. I met George Hayes in the lobby of the Dow Hotel. And I didn't know, he didn't have all of his dress on. He had a beard, and I didn't even know I couldn't recognize him. Because I was given a gun, and I knew that I had a scene where I had to twirl the gun. And I had no idea how to twirl a gun. So I was playing with this gun, and George came over and said, "Let me show you how to do that." And he went, bloop, 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 bloop. Well, he was an expert with that. And I said, "Wow, teach me how to do that." So for the next few days or so, we got together several times, and he would show me how to do this gun trick, which is pretty easy when you know how to do it. But he was very gracious to me, and I began to meet other people who were in the crews, the lighting crew, the sound crews, and the other crews that were all packed together, and they were a very close unit. But as I met them, they began to accept me as a kid who had a part, and was very interested in whatever they were doing, and it made a nice relationship. I have some wonderful memories from those people who were in the crews that were very kind to me and very helpful to me and very, very useful, for that matter, during that first movie. Yes. Okay,
Okay. Anytime.
Let me tell you about the end of my movie career. Clarence Mulford had written 4 movies, or 4 books, that Pop Sherman purchased to put into films, that included a kid cowboy who actually rescued Hoppy in 4 of those movies. When those 4 movies ended, there was no more work for a kid. So Pop Sherman terminated my contract, and I went home. Now, the way the termination of the contract was not, you call me in the office and you have an interview and say, this is a whatever you do for when you're cutting a guy out of the business. The way they did it was each year a gift was presented to you as a crew member that was from what they call a production company. Well, I found out later that the production company was actually Bill Boyd, because Bill Boyd wanted to keep these crews together because he liked them, and they were very, very good people to work as far as he was concerned. So I was talking the second year, the end of the second year sometime, to Henry Donovan, who was my good friend, who was the wardrobe man, who had a truck full of all kinds of things that I just loved to get in there and look at all the guns that he had and the holsters that he had and the clothes that he had. And he didn't have too many clothes because they had somebody for that, but he was the properties man, I think, is what he was called on the screen. And Henry said, "Did you get your gift?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, and then he showed me what the gift was. I don't recall what it was. But I said, "No, I didn't get it." Well, he says, "That means that you don't have a contract for next year." Well, that was obvious when there was no more movies to shoot. So as a result of that, we just packed up and went home to Delano. And I got back home, got back into my normal role. I was in the 7th and 8th grade, and I finished the 8th grade in grammar school, and then went into high school through the 4 years of high school. And one of the events that happened while I was in high school was the drama teacher, who was a young lady, asked if I could arrange for our group from Delano High School to come to the Paramount Studios and look around. Oh, I said, probably. So I called Pop. Pop, I mean, sure, come on down, we'll take care of you. Well, she got together, I don't know, 8 or maybe 10 of the members of the drama club that all got in a bus and drove to Los Angeles, got in a hotel, and the next day went to Paramount Studios. So when we got to Paramount Studios, I went into Pop Sherman's office to say hello, and he was very gracious to me, and turned to his secretary and said, "Take these kids over to whatever lot," he mentioned a lot, "and show them around, and then take them into the cafeteria and have lunch, and show them around the Paramount Studios." Well, fine. So this lady left the office and went with us, and took us into several of the Paramount big buildings. I call them big buildings. I know what they call them. Sound stages, I guess, is what they call them. Because you come in, and then you can watch what's being shot. So these these students and I walked in and we looked and watched them shoot this scene and watched them shoot that scene. It was very, very interesting to me. And at lunchtime, we sat down in the cafeteria. Well, the cafeteria is a place, I guess, where at noon all the crews stop and they come and have lunch. Well, coming into this place was many, many, many people, but occasionally there would be a star. And oh my God, oh, there's so-and-so and so-and-so. Oh, there's so-and-so and so-and-so. So the secretary was helpful in that she was pointing out some of the people that we may have missed. And she kind of detailed all of the people that were in there. And it was very impressive to have lunch in the same cafeteria where many of the movie stars have their lunch. So after lunch we finished up, and finally in the afternoon we went out to where Bill Boyd was shooting. And when we got to his location, he spotted me and immediately came over, shook my hand, hugged me and said, "How are you?" and so forth, and just was so gracious to me. But he was not gracious only to me, but he made a point of seeing each of these people and saying hello to them and looking them right in the eye and shaking their hands and "How are you?" And they were gaga. They just were gaga about the man who was Bill Boyd, but he was Hopalong Cassidy to every one of these kids in the cast. So we got in the bus and came home, and that was the end of the trip. And the drama teacher was so impressive and so gracious to me that we could arrange that it was kind of a nice thing to do. And then my next 4 years, I went to high school and normal high school events and so forth, and graduated. After I graduated, I went to work that summer for the Forestry Service, and then came back in September and registered at a local Sierra Junior College, which was in Visalia. Now, the Sierra Junior College sent a bus to Delano to pick up students who were going to school. And Delano, and then you go to Early Martin, Pixley, and so forth, and all of the towns that would pick up students and stop in Tulare and go on into Visalia and deliver us as students to the Sierra College. And that was where I met my wife. I don't know whether you want me to tell this or not, John.
Well, just go ahead and we'll just cut it out. We got to get Bev in here too for her screen test.
I was on the bus. Well, come on, Bev.
No.
We'll just get her in there for a cameo.
No.
Okay. I was on the bus, and as a so-called movie star, through my high school days, I was extremely popular with girls. Not so much with the guys. For some reason, they didn't buy the idea too much. But dating girls was not difficult for me as far as I was concerned. But when I went back to school in September, I didn't have a girlfriend to speak of, and I met Bev. So we got together, and I dated her. And she was the last woman I ever dated in my life, because we were married after I finished my naval training and had 3 kids